Hello, everyone. As usual, it's really nice to be with you. I sure do enjoy these Wednesday afternoon conversations, as I hope you do also. Today, I have a special guest, and I'm looking forward to this interview. As it's getting to be springtime, I'm thinking about planting and what I want to grow this year, and what I want to do, and what I want to expand with. And today's talk goes along with that because I love herbs. But before we talk about that, let's talk about this. Oops, that was not what I expected, but hi. Now we'll go to here. We will go to here, won't we? For some reason, it didn't come up, but there we go. Anyway, Health and Healing God's Way is our second event at Melvin's Farm to Fork near Roanoke, Virginia. It will be April 25th, 26th, and then we'll have a special worship service on Sunday morning, the 27th. Last year's event was well attended, and it was just such an encouragement, so informative and so edifying. We're eager to share some of the same speakers and some new speakers and all new topics with you this year. Our early bird pricing does end on Friday, I believe, on the 31st of January. Yep, that's Friday. So if you want to get in on that, go ahead and click on that link and check it out. We're always thinking about making this affordable for as many people to attend as is possible because we share such important information. We want you to be there. So we hope to see you at Health and Healing God's Way, the God's Good Table, and Melvin's Farm to Fork store event this April 25th through 27th. All right. That said, I would like to introduce you to my friend Alicia Wornicov. Alicia, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So nice to have you. Yeah. I just have to put up this little picture if it'll let me. There we go.
There we are.
Yeah. I met Alicia last August, late August, early September at the Homesteaders Jamboree in Fletcher, North Carolina. I had to think of which town. I was at a couple for different things. Anyway, I had the pleasure of meeting Alicia there and getting to know her a little bit. And I was just so very impressed. I love all things herbs anyway, and I so much appreciated your talk. I did not go on your weed walk because I was busy doing other things. I think I might have even been teaching, but I heard good things about it. And I was glancing over, watching you and thinking, man, I wish I could be with you and see what I could learn. You have so much to offer, and I'm very thankful that you're here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be an herbalist and all of that good stuff?
That is a long story. I'll try to get to the gist of it. But I was 15 years old when I moved to South America, and I moved in with a Mapuche tribe. And they are kind of like the Cherokee of South America. So the largest native tribe to that area in the foothills of the Andes. And living with them opened my eyes to using all things around you as a resource. And of course, renewable resource, whether it be for food. They're master weavers, so they used it for dyeing their textiles. And medicine, we had the lady that I lived with had an ulcer on her leg, and she kept that thing at bay just with what she was picking. But as I watched them live, it was like I'm 15 years old and I'm sitting here thinking, I really want to, know what my calling is in life. And I'm a very practical, common sense kind of a gal. I don't like frills and I don't like unnecessary drama around things. And the plants just seem so literally down to earth, right? Down to earth.
Quite literally.
Quite literally down to earth and so practical. And I was thinking how I could serve other people. My plan since I was 8 years old was I really just wanted to serve people in South America. And so that's what I was doing there. I moved back full time when I was 17. And in between that 15 and 17 gap, I was taken in by a 5th generation Mexican herbalist, Susanna Ferris. And so she lived the same way. I'm originally from California. My family's from Tennessee, where I live now. We've been back here 18 years when my firstborn of 4 was born. But she really had that same mentality of everything around you as a renewable resource for you to use for food, for medicine, for whatever. And even I saw how relationships were built through like this plant and natural health community. And I felt like, hey, those are my people, because like they're all down to earth and they're all just looking. There's something about when you're an herbalist, you have a common thread, and you're trying to serve people and you're trying to better people's lives. And when you're doing that with the people around you, it builds good relationships because you're serving one another. So it just had like this. I really felt like it was my calling. I really felt like that's where I was put on this path. And that was 25 years ago this coming April. So I just turned 40. So it's been a good little chunk of my life that I've been dabbling in plants and studying plants and teaching plants. And it's kind of gone into every avenue of my life and brought people into my life. It's been wonderful. So I'm mostly these days a foraging teacher. So my passion is kind of when you met me, I was teaching out in the woods class. And that's really what I love to do. I like to get people out of their books and into the grass and into the woods and out into the forest. And they call this thing the green wall, right? You look out there and I say, okay, what do you see? And everybody's like, well, I see a lot of green. Like, okay, let's break it down. So there's trees, there's shrubs, there's plants, what's growing where. So just teaching people ecosystems, where to look for some of these plants. They'll say, oh, well, this looks really similar to my house. This is a pine ridge, and I say, well, you're going to find a lot of the same things here. And just so attaching connecting everybody to the idea of going outside and becoming familiar with what's around them instead of just being so intimidated by everything's poisonous. You shouldn't touch anything. It's all getting poisonous. So I'd say 95% of what grows outside, if not 100, has a use. Yeah.
I agree. I think God put every plant, I don't think that, I know that. He put every plant on this planet for a purpose. And while we can bring herbs from all over the world for our use, I think we have something in everyone's backyard, and many somethings.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I'm big on that thought too. Just real quick, I do want to touch more on what you just said here in a minute. So go ahead with what.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm curious if you found any plants in South America that are the same or similar to Tennessee or California.
So where I was way down south when I lived with the Mapuche tribe, but I actually went to YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission. That's where I met my husband. He's from Uruguay. And we met in YWAM when I was 17. And the base where I went was a little town called Pichilemu, which means little forest. And it was a little pine forest, which was really neat because I grew up in a pine and redwood forest in California. And it was actually the same exact distance from the equator as my hometown to this place in South America. So it was extremely similar. And I was a surfer gal. So it actually had the same kind of wave setup. And I actually met a lot of the same people from Santa Cruz, California, down in Pichilemu. And I'm like, what are you doing here? They're like, oh, this is our surf spot for the winter. And I was like, I don't know. The seasons are flopped.
It is cool.
Not only the plants, but even my neighbors showed up in my little tiny beach town of Pichilemu. But
wow.
Yeah, so actually there's a lot of similar, because it's pine and because it's coastal, there was actually a lot of similarities with where I was originally from. But I wouldn't say too much with Tennessee. I think they do have mullein. Probably mulleins all over the place, but yeah, not too similar. I did have to relearn everything from scratch when I moved to Tennessee, and I was very focused on that for a good 10 years. I really hunkered down and focused on, if I don't know it, I want to learn it. It's like a stranger in my yard, who are you and what are you doing here?
I love that. And I was the same way when we had our farm for 17 years in Pennsylvania. And I loved just going out with my herb book and my native plant books and just identifying everything and figuring out ways that I could use it. And then we moved to Virginia and I did it all over again.
Yeah, it's difficult, but it's kind of fun. And there are good resources. I do want to talk about some of the resources. People say, well, how am I supposed to find out, what's growing in my yard and what it's good for? Those are the big first two questions. And now, so when I was learning, we didn't have like plant apps. Now you're like, don't cheat unless you're cheating. So just put your little phone down and grab a book. Or one of the first things that I did is I went to my UT extension office. So your state should have an extension office for the agriculture department. And there's usually somebody who specializes in forestry or pasture management. And they're usually willing to come out onto your property and walk around with you and say, oh, this is this and this is this. So I did that about 20 years ago when I moved to Tennessee. That was one of the first things that I did. And they came out about 3 times. But this book is something he kept grabbing out of his trunk. And this is actually one of the textbooks from the University of Tennessee that they use in the forestry program. And it's called Weeds. Now, it's not going to tell you like medicinal uses, but this thing is so informative because it talks about the seed, the seedling, the mature plant, the range, the botanical name. So even if it doesn't tell you the uses for if it's edible, if it's medicinal, at least you can positively ID something, because that's very important to learn how to ID something. And on that same note, so somebody from California called me one time and they said, oh, we've been collecting blue dandelions and making tea out of them. And I was like,
Blue dandelions.
There's not blue dandelions. So what, you have to be careful because plants don't change that much. Okay. There's like a dandelion and then there's a blue. So you have to kind of learn. I grabbed.
Was it actually chicory?
It was chicory. And I said, you need to send me a picture. You're lucky that wasn't poisonous. Don't be making tea out of blue dandelions without asking somebody first. But I think a little bit of botany is important to incorporate if you're serious about starting to identify plants and using them. So if you're not going to be so much into foraging, but you're going to be buying plants from good resources online in a bag that's labeled already. So that's one way to do herbalism. You can buy things. You want peppermint, buy a pound of peppermint and make some tea, whatever. But if you're going to be into foraging and using the things that are on your land, I do think that you need to get a little bit of botany. And this is really simple. It's botany coloring book. And we're a homeschool family, so we like to do a lot of this learning.
But that is so beneficial to adults as well as kids, because
this is an adult book.
Yeah, I remember seeing an anatomy. Actually, I have it, an anatomy book. The same kind of thing. You color it and you learn.
Yes,
so
because
it's the anatomy of plants.
You're not just staring at a page and passing over it. So this isn't even the book, but there's some really good simple botany books. You don't have to become a botanist, but you do have to be familiar with the concept that if a flower, say, has 5 petals all the time, or 4 petals, let's say 4 petals, it might be in the mustard family. If it has several ray petals, it may be in the aster family. So if it doesn't have, things like that, because you don't want to go thinking that there's blue dandelions and start making tea. It's just a little bit, you just need to touch on it. And there's really good videos. YouTube is a very good resource, especially if you kind of get to know 1, 2, or 3 really good tried and true herbalists or botanists. Don't just kind of look at every single video that comes up on a subject, but maybe if you want to pick like Jim McDonald, who's been an herbalist forever. He does plant walks. He's a good teacher. He shows you what it is. He walks you through where it's going to be growing. So especially if you can kind of follow a few herbalists and just teach it like school and just build up your knowledge and understanding of plants that way. So that
I'm really battling the sun as it's moving across the sky here. But are you familiar with these, the Penelope Odie books?
I have those. Yeah. Those are
Yeah,
great.
these were probably the first books that I really learned from. But I'm a visual learner.
Mhm.
And so, when you've got pictures like this, I hope people
Yeah.
can see. Next week, I hope to have a shade up so that I don't have to battle the sunshine. But I like these, especially for people like me who need to see. And it tells us what we can do. And then the home herbal, Penelope Odie home herbal.
Yeah, those are both
These are
great.
not the only two books that I've learned from, but they are the two books that I've learned the most from, probably.
Yeah, it's good to have a variety. I do think that it's really important to have photographs and not just line drawings if you're trying to
Yeah.
identify something. It's okay to get information once you have identified a plant, to go ahead and get like one of my favorite books. I have a stack of books here, and before we close, I'll just kind of run through them. You guys can rewind this later. And so this is edible. I know this is backwards. Edible and medicinal plants, identifying and harvesting. But this is not a photograph book, but it's very
Right.
good botanical drawings. That's not a good example.
I think I have that book.
It's very, very good. I have so many good books. I need just to do a post or a video just on books one day.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I did 10 years ago, but I've added over 100 books since then. And I have an herbal library going into my new apothecary, and it's an entire wall. So it'll be open just for looking at. But
Wow.
so if you want to learn identification, definitely use photographs, videos.
Yeah.
It is fine to use plant apps, but don't let that be the final authority. Go and make sure, especially if you're going to be ingesting it, you want to make real sure that you've got the right plant. I even still make mistakes after 25 years. I thought, and it's something I know, like colt's foot, right? Colt's foot's a really easy one. It grows all around me. And I was picking something that I was sure was colt's foot, and I just thought it was a little bit big. It ended up being Indian pale plantain or something like that. And it was a new one to me, but it bolted really tall. And I said, well, colt's foot doesn't bolt. What did I pick? Oh no. It's really good for like anti-tumor and all kinds of good stuff. But it could have been bad though. And so I should have.
Yeah, there are a couple that are very bad, like Peter Rabbit getting into, what is it?
Oh, poisonous hemlock is one of the worst ones we have in our area. Yeah.
We have a lot of it too, and it looks so much like another plant that's actually useful.
Parsley and carrot. It's in the parsley family, and it looks just like wild carrot, and but it's deadly. So yeah, you have to know. That's not to scare you guys off, but that's just maybe start with 5 plants is what I always tell people. And if
what
5
would those 5 be for you, for most people?
So I really like to keep. If I have to talk about the entire United States and North America all at one time, even though it's not native, dandelion, because it's useful for so many systems, and it's very identifiable, and it's very safe. And your kids can pop it in their mouth and eat it, and nothing's going to happen. You can safely have it around the house. And there's so many systems and things that it says urinary system, and it is vitamin rich, and there's so many things that you can do with it. You can tincture it, make tea. You can dry the root and grind it. So it's one that you can kind of play with a lot, and everybody's going to have it. All 50 states have it.
And all of the plant is useful. The whole plant.
The whole plant's useful, and it's going to pop back up. You're not going to damage the population by playing with it, harvest as much as you want. So
I don't think we have to worry about running out of dandelion.
So I think that's a really good one to start with, even though it's native to Europe and it's not native to North America. But I'm not big on only. We were going to talk about this too. I need to find the line. I want to talk about so many things at a time.
Well, first let's go over the 5, and then we're going to come back to invasive species.
Okay, so mullein is another really good one. One of my books has mullein right on the front. Let's see. But mullein is Verbascum thapsum, and that's the great mullein. And most people have it. We had it in California, and it grows all over the East Coast. I know it grows up north. I don't know if it grows in Florida in the super southern areas. Parts of Texas have it. I've traveled most of the United States, and I've seen mullein in most places. So that would be another good one to play with, because again, the entire plant is useful. And the roots, the leaves, and the flowers all have 3 very different actions. So that would be another really good one to use. I think pine. It's not a plant, but it's a tree. We all have some sort of pine around us. And as long as you don't get into, there's really only a couple, like hemlock is one of them, and not the poisonous hemlock, but like the hemlock tree. But any sort of pine is useful, and you can use the pine sap. You can use the pine needles. You can use the pine bark. Look what I've been doing lately.
Oh, you know what? I saw one of your videos, and so I went and looked up some more, and I thought, oh man, if only I had time.
So pine, okay, plants are great. Plants are useful. We like to eat them. We like to use them for medicine, but they can also just be like your hobby. And I've also gotten into processing yucca leaves for fibers and weaving with fibers and stuff like that too.
Oh, good.
So pine is great medicine, and you can make some fun stuff like fizzy probiotic pine needle soda with your kids, Keep that on hand. So pine is good. Let's see. You can do willows and stuff like that too, talking about trees. Trying to think of things that would grow just about everywhere. Usnea, the people call it the old man's beard. Is that what they call it? Old man's beard?
Yep, old man's beard, yep.
Usnea barbata. Some people say usnea, but it's Usnea barbata. It's actually a lichen, which is an algae and a fungus symbiotically living together, and they're the little clumps in the trees that look like, some people say it's moss, but it's a lichen.
Yeah, so, they call it Spanish moss.
There's different species. There is actually a Spanish moss that grows down like in the Carolinas and Florida that gets really long.
And that's not the same thing, is it?
It's very similar, but and it's not dangerous or anything, but it's not used exactly the same way as Usnea barbata is. And but that is found from coast to coast. I don't think
I have harvested that in Maine and brought it back, and I still have about a quart of tincture.
Yeah,
that's really potent.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So it's and I do have a video on that on Wild Harvest Life. I do have a video on Usnea. So I won't go into all what it does, but it's a lichen that you can use, and it grows up in the trees, and you wait for like a windstorm to knock down. You don't go climbing trees and get it, but windstorms will get you lots and lots of Usnea. I live in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. I don't think we mentioned that, but Usnea pretty much coats our trees here. And so it's readily available. But I would say whatever 5 you're going to pick, because I keep listing things off, but if you're in Arizona, you're going to have different things out there, and you may want to get into some of your sages or the rabbit weed or something like that. The prairies have different things. I just say whatever's very prolific around you that you feel comfortable picking a lot of. Like here would be the violets. Wild violets are very safe. They're very kid friendly. They work on a lot of different systems, the lymphatic system, good for the bronchial. So what is it? It's good for the Hoxsey treatment in breast cancer. That wild violets use. So a lot of different systems, and I like that because you can kind of use one plant to study lots of subjects, instead of just
that's neat.
Specific. So
well, and all of them that you've mentioned have very specific and useful purposes. So, for instance, dandelion, the root is good for, I'm going to let you fill in the blanks.
Okay, so the whole plant is, it's the star of the show on one of my favorite books. But if you go, especially to this book, it'll talk you through like the chemical compounds that are found in each thing. So it has a lot of minerals and vitamins and the trace minerals. in it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us take like trace mineral additives and put them in our water and things like that. But really, if we would just do infusions of like dandelion, alfalfa, nettle, oat straw, the really rich mineral. And I took that for my prenatal vitamin because I couldn't, I was so sick that I took those in infusions to keep my minerals and my vitamins up.
Yeah.
And it's a more available way to take those. But dandelion is very useful for kidney function and liver. I always say, what doesn't dandelion do is I haven't even done a video on dandelion because I feel like it would be an hour-long video of just me blabbing.
There's so much.
But
And
I use
burdock is similar, and it has some similar properties.
to what?
Burdock and dandelion have some similar.
So yeah, like burdock is more potent, especially as a blood cleanser. Blood cleansers, I think dandelion works as a blood cleanser because it's working on your filtering organs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your liver and your kidneys have to be cleaned out, have to have some sort of tonic strengthening them and building them so that as your blood is filtering through, it's able to soak up and draw those toxins in. Because if you have clogged filters on your car, what's going to happen, right? I mean, it's the same with our bodies. If our filtering organs are already saturated with toxins and sludge, then they're not really doing a good job at removing toxins from our bloodstream. So if we clean those things out with burdock or dandelion, I make one with like yellow dock in it, schisandra berry. There's a bunch of stuff. And what else is in there? Red clover is in there to help draw out some of the toxins and support the liver. So like can't think. Milk thistle seed is in there, and that helps proliferate new healthy liver cells. And so if you're purging out old liver cells that aren't useful, aren't working, and you're proliferating the growth of new liver cells, then your liver is able to kind of pop back into action and do what it's supposed to do. And it's really not just a filtering organ. The liver has over 200 known functions, and they think like 1,000 more that they're not even sure what. Helps with hormone production, and which is huge. It's like one of the biggest systems in your body that you want to have running correctly. So just drinking dandelion tea would help with a lot of those things. And especially when people are trying to do like a diuretic, but they're worried about stripping out minerals. Dandelion is a really good one because it contains so many minerals, but it's also helping the kidneys flush and cleanse. But without stripping the minerals. So I just think a good nourishing tea, you can drink it iced, you can drink it hot, throw it in your sauce. But
it just, as we're talking, I'm just thinking about what we started with, which is how God gives us everything out there for our health, for food and for medicine. And even okay, this is one of the granddaughters, and she came over today because they're moving and she wanted to hang out, and she doesn't like stink bugs. We haven't figured out a good use for stink bugs yet, but I'm sure there's one. I can't help you with a stink bug right now, honey. But anyway, like the dandelion, every part of the dandelion has a use. And I believe that the same is true for every plant, even if it's not a use for our health. There's a use for every plant.
Right, basket making or dye or you never know. Like different things have. This mentions. I think this has burdock and dandelion in it. This is another really good book. Rosemary Gladstar is kind of like one of the mamas of herbalism, right?
Definitely is.
But this is a really great book if you really want to start getting into some stuff and you don't really know where to start, or if you're talking about, what's going to be my top 5 plants that I want to use. This would be a really good one because it talks about all these different preparations you can make. But I'll go to dandelion. You can actually use dandelion topically. Here's burdock. Yeah, it has burdock and dandelion in it. That's why I grabbed this book. So I'm like, speaking of both of those plants. So it's going to show you, my lighting is bad. It's going to show you a kind of an infograph at the beginning with some photographs, and then it's going to get into all the different uses, and then it's going to get into dandelion burdock tincture for liver health. There you go. Speaking of, if you're wondering why I randomly grabbed this book, it's because I was like, I know what this would be great for. This is liver and kidney health, roasted dandelion and chicory tea, and dandelion mocha. Because dandelion roasted with a very similar taste to coffee. It's like that roasted, creamy, and especially if you add chicory to it. So chicory and dandelion together would be a good thing to drink, like if you're trying to get off of coffee, you have caffeine sensitivity. So this book is really good.
I use Dandy Blend, which is dandelion and chicory and a couple of other things. And I use that as a base sometimes for a super brew blend that I make.
That sounds good. Yeah. I love that roasty, creamy. I own a coffee shop. It's literally the door next to me. So if I open that door, I'm going to grab. So I'm a coffee drinker. I'm a tea drinker too. But so the point I want you guys to kind of think in these terms of, even if you live in an apartment, you can always go to a friend's house, a relative's house. There are areas that you're going to be able to go. Like I have little preserve areas that our little town owns, and they know me. I teach classes out on. So my problem is I live in the national park, right? And in the national park, I live in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and it's actually it's not a national forest. It's a national park. It's like Yellowstone, Yosemite, something like that. So there's federal laws that I can't harvest anything out of those parts, but out of the national forest, that's public land, and you are allowed to harvest out of a national forest. So if you're near a national forest, and some state parks, you just have to ask the ranger what their policy is on state parks, because it varies from park to park. So as we traveled the United States and I was wanting to gather things everywhere that I went, I had to kind of learn the rules of where to gather and where not to gather. Some of that includes thinking about what kind of road you might be on and where they have sprayed or where might be contaminated, those types of things. But there are a lot of backcountry roads that I would be fine with picking things off of if they were just like a nice clean road with a few houses on it. But if you can get into preserves or national forest or something, there's always somewhere to pick something to go learn off of. So just start thinking in terms of where your areas are going to be, whether it's your yard or you have to go somewhere out, and then kind of make a plan of maybe learning. Maybe just one day you go out and you start taking pictures of things and identifying them. Maybe you're a more advanced herbalist, which I have a feeling a lot of our audience would be like already way down the line on this. If you're into natural health, you probably incorporate herbs somehow into your daily life. And so then you can just start learning, try to learn. My thing is, if I don't recognize a plant, I want to know what it is. I've tried to learn every plant around me. It's taken years, and I don't think I'll ever know every plant around me, obviously. But it's a lifelong journey, so just keep that in mind of you don't have to be overwhelmed with how much you don't know, because even after 100 years, I always say this is my little thing I always say. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything.
I love that, because I say the same thing. And I kind of get irritated sometimes when people say, oh, I'm the authority, I know everything. Or no. If you're actually being honest, the more I know, the more I know I don't know.
Yeah, the more I realize I don't know nothing. So especially with plants, because you're talking about knowing ecology, phytochemistry, botany. A lot of cases you need to know anatomy. You need to know where your liver and kidneys are and what your bloodstream does. And especially if you're using plants and the human body and the environment all at the same time. And so it's several different sciences involved. And you can kind of find your interest with that. Like I got way more into trees for a couple of years because I was like, sometimes I get burnt out on herbs. I'm like, don't even ask me about a plant. I'm done, right? I'm never doing herbs again. I'm so over it. And then spring comes and I'm like, who wants to do an herb class? You know? But
I'm eager for that. And I think you would agree that no matter where you are, unless you're in an apartment building, maybe, but there are herbs outside your back door no matter what. We have less than an acre, and I haven't identified maybe half of what's here.
yeah.
But we've got black cohosh, of course, dandelion, mullein, bloodroot. Bloodroot is one of the first
Wow.
things that pops up in the spring, and I'm just so
Wow.
enthralled every year when I see that. But on and on. So there's something everywhere. And you know, that little app on the phone, I use it all the time. I might be traveling to a different place, or I'm out in my yard and I'm thinking, oh man, I forgot. What is that? What can I do with it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to identify things because they are toxic or poisonous to
Right.
maybe an animal. So you need to know. But what are some things that wait, before we go into what we can do with them, we just have to go to this one because it's my favorite invasive series or plant.
So I know that by bringing up that picture right there, a bunch of people just got mad.
I know.
Mimosa, it's the devil. And then some people say it's such a beautiful plant and it's lovely and doesn't do anything. And so there's like two camps on this for sure. So that's my mom on the left. Bless her heart. She's always scoping things out for me. She goes, I found the coolest mimosa tree. You've got to bring the kids up. So she's all on board. She's a sweetheart. And that's my son underneath it. And I have a couple of kids hanging in that tree harvesting for me.
Oh, that's funny.
I do want to talk about using invasive medicine, invasives as medicine and food. So I do not believe that we need to be going around and planting invasives. I don't want you to think that's what I'm promoting. I'm not saying go plant honeysuckle or mimosas in your yard or kudzu. Like
yes. There's got to be a use for that.
There's so many. There's actually a book called the Kudzu book, and it's just all the uses on kudzu.
Oh, cool. Wow. It's
amazing. It's food, it's medicine, it's biofuel, it's clothing, it's all kinds of stuff. So kudzu is actually great, but yes, use the invasives. No, don't plant them and promote planting them. So I would say they're here to stay. We're not ever going to eradicate, unfortunately, some of these things that have come in. But by using them and collecting the flowers and collecting the seeds or the vines, whatever it might be, you are kind of diminishing that plant population around you. So, for example, Japanese honeysuckle, which is the Londacera family, Japonica. I have used so much Japanese honeysuckle off my property that I can't find anymore, and I have to go to other people's property. I have to go to other people's property to get it. So I mean, that's
what are you using it for?
So it has 12 known antiviral constituents in it. So when COVID came around, especially because we didn't really know what kind of a beast we were dealing with, that was one of the first ones that I went to just for the antiviral. I use that, St. John's wort, and lemon balm as my antivirals. Those three as a combination for viruses are very potent. So I learned at first that there was 12 antiviral constituents. Now I think that was about 15 years ago. I think the latest that I've read, they've identified like 23 different phytochemical combinations in there that attack viruses. And you can actually see this. There's YouTube channels where they use different things in petri dishes against bacteria and viruses. And you can actually see different plants have different strategies against killing viruses. So some will implode a cell from inside. Some will attack it from the outside and mimic the virus, bust in there, and then lock the cell so that nothing else can come in there.
Wow.
Ashwagandha does that. Ashwagandha
Yeah.
breaks in, and it's like a key to a cell. So it'll break into a viral cell, and it will seal the cell so that it can't reproduce anymore.
Replicate. Yeah.
So there's just different plants that work in different ways against different types of viruses. So honeysuckle is one that has so many different, 23 now, last I heard, ways of attacking a virus that it's really good for so many of them, especially when we have like mysterious unnatural viruses these days. So it's one that I keep on hand for that. It's also good in cooling the system down. So if you have high blood pressure, which I do, I've had high blood pressure since I was like 12. And
wow.
it's something that I've had to battle with pretty much my whole life. And there's certain things that help calm my system down, because I can get really hot, dry, and irritated. Everybody has a certain constitution. So if your mouth is dry and your skin is dry and your hair is dry and everything's dry and you kind of run hot, that's how I am. So my daughter, she's always cold and moist, right? She's got damp little hands and she's always cold. So she can take things like cinnamon and cayenne and warming herbs that are good for the circulation, because she's cold and she's dry. She's cold and she's wet. So I'm hot and I'm dry all the time. That's just the constitution of my body. So I would want to take things that are damp and cooling. So aloe, marshmallow root, peach is one of the big ones. Even foods like cucumbers and peaches and melons and things like that that are cooling to the body are better for me than hot, drying herbs. So honeysuckle is a dry, cooling herb. So knowing what an herb does to the body, it cools off inflammation, it cools off. So like if you had irritable bowel syndrome or you had anything hot and inflamed, honeysuckle would help cool that down and stifle the inflammation. So
I'll have to add that for my husband for his rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, well, there's so many good ones for arthritis. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that because you mentioned the bowels and autoimmune diseases begin in the bowels, as do nearly everything, but in particular that.
But I did want to show you this book real quick. It's Invasive Plant Medicine, the Ecological Benefits, and I'm reading backwards, and Healing Abilities of Invasives. This is such a great book. So it talks about using all sorts of familiar North American invasives, and it kind of changes your mind on how you'll see invasives, but I'm not promoting invasives over natives in planting.
But if we have them, we should learn to use them. And even as with the mimosa, which is my favorite tree, yes, they're invasive, but I dig them up and transplant them. And excuse me while I try to get out of the sun again, and I don't know if I can. I control, they proliferate in the yard, and some of them get mowed down, some of them get chopped down, and some of them I just dig up and I share with other people or I transplant. But they are such beautiful trees. And then I planted autumn olive last summer, and they're invasive. And I was warned when I bought the plants that people are going to say, "Oh no, why did you do that?" But you know what? I planted them on the lawn in a place where I can easily control them. So if they're going to give me food and medicine, then I'm going to take advantage of that because they do well here. And you can just, we're supposed to steward the garden and steward the earth. So I don't care if there's something that's invasive. I'd rather just steward it, control it, and use it.
Like I said, I use so much honeysuckle, I don't have any left on my property, So
I have some I can share with you.
So, but it covers some things like English ivy, garlic mustard, Japanese honeysuckle, knotweed, kudzu, plantain. I'm skipping autumn olive. There you go.
Yeah.
Siberian elm, thistle, tree of heaven, white
Yeah.
mulberry, wild mustard, and wild rose. And I skipped a bunch of them. But
Tree
imagine
of Heaven is
learning
a toughie.
to
I will
use all
say
those
that.
things.
Yeah.
Imagine just learning what all the benefits are to those and using them instead of this is teaching alcohol,
And especially instead of pharmaceuticals.
especially instead of foreign food. So kudzu is a big one for alcoholism, curbing your appetite for alcohol. But
Okay.
there's so many things that they do have some pictures, just a few, but not, the book isn't like riddled with pictures. It's mostly a good read.
Okay.
Definitely
Oops is
get that one.
asking if there is a use for privet.
I do believe there's a use for privet, but I haven't found out what it is.
We'll have to
I've been asking that question for a long time.
Let us know if you find out. Oops, we can look it up, but
I have looked it up. I've actually looked into that for a long time, and it's not anything that there's information on in English because it's a Chinese plant. So
okay.
a lot of the Chinese, because they have such a long running history with using plants as food and medicine, I actually met somebody when I was in Houston working who's from China and was somewhat familiar with the herbal uses of things. And I went to her over mimosa. I said, there's something about mimosa I don't understand, and I can't find information on it in English. Can you help me read through this Chinese information? Because something about it's a blood mover, and nobody talks about that in English. But they have a long history and understanding of mimosa. And we're not talking about the drink. A lot of people are like, what is mimosa? It's the tree we just showed. It's Albizia julibrissin, and it's native to Asia.
Yeah.
So that's the one we're talking about. But something about it being a blood mover. And I was like, I need to understand this better because I'm really big on using mimosa, but I have high blood pressure. So she read through a lot of things, and she did. There was a section on I don't remember what it was. I'm sorry, but it was like 4 years ago. But there was information in Chinese that she was able to read directly for me. And there was information on privet, but we didn't really get into it. So I don't think you're going to find it in English, but you might find it if you can hunt down a Chinese friend.
Yeah, and we'll keep looking. Two of my favorite plants are golden seal root and comfrey, and we haven't talked about either, but comfrey is another one of those that is just so easy to grow and prolific. And my friend Lacey Dixon gave me some a couple of years ago because when we moved, I didn't have any anymore. And it's just growing and growing and growing. The chickens love it, and I use it. Actually, I got a really bad cut being stupid with a very sharp knife last night. And it's a deep cut and it looks really messy and dirty, but it looks like that because I rubbed comfrey root powder that I mixed with golden seal root powder.
Yeah.
About 3 parts comfrey root and 1 part golden seal root. I rubbed that in. The golden seal acts as an antibacterial, and the comfrey makes it heal really fast. So it was bleeding profusely. I thought, man, I don't want to have to go to urgent care, but that was so deep, I might have to go to urgent care. But once I cleaned it up enough and applied pressure for a while, I packed that powder into it. And today it's fine. Wow. So I'd like to transfer now our line of thought into how to use some of these common herbs that we might have around us.
Okay.
So
I'm ready for that. I brought visuals for all of this. So say you're going outside, you found a bunch of plant that you want to use. There's different, so I like drying plants if I am going to use them long term. So you can put things directly into a tincture. So I like to use, there's that picture. So Maureen has a few pictures that I sent her earlier, and some of these will touch on that. So see that right there? That's red clover.
Yep.
So I have a bunch of these dehydrators that I pick up from yard sales and thrift stores for like $5. And they have lots of trays. I don't like the Excalibur ones because the heat source is at the back and it dries the ones on the back, and the ones on the front are never dry. I like the cheaper ones that the heat source is up in the lid and it blows and circulates down in a circular way. The trays that she just showed, the one before this, but this is so these circular ones dry from top to bottom very well. I like to dry things on 95 if they are herbaceous, because you don't want to cook things. So there's a fine line between drying too hot and cooking your herb, or too slow and allowing the enzymes of the plant to start decomposing the plant. So if things are getting brown and losing their scent and color and flavor, you've either cooked it or it's starting to compost on itself because you haven't dried it fast enough. So if it's summertime in Tennessee, it's so humid here. It's hot enough, but it's so humid that things may take a long time to dry. If you're in Arizona, you're not going to have that problem because it's so arid that things are wicking the moisture off of those plants. So just consider where you live and the humidity level of where you live. And you want to get those plants to where they're dry and crunchy. If they are not crunching, there's still moisture in them, and you're going to store them and they're going to mold. So this is just kind of an overflow bag. This is not how I store things, but I wanted to talk about labeling, which is extremely important. I like to store things like this. And I have, oh, do you have the picture of my apothecary set up?
Yes, I do.
So I've had about 8 different apothecaries set up just in the house.
Here's one. And I have another there.
So if you can find some sort of uniform jar, it's nice because you can build. So we built this for free out of scrap lumber, and you can measure your shelves to fit your jars that you're going to be using. So you can have some for quart jars, some for pint jars. These jars that I'm holding here are from an Amish store, from their jam house, and I buy them empty from the Amish jam house.
Okay.
Cases. And I like them because they're transparent, even though you want to, don't have transparent glass or any glass in direct sunlight in a windowsill. But if it's going to be away from direct sunlight, it's fine to have it in transparent glass where the sunlight's not going to degrade those herbs.
Okay.
But it's nice to be able to see through when it's a bulk herb like this, so you can look at the whole entire shelf and you'll get to learn it. You'll see, oh, peppermint's here, comfrey's here, calendula's here. So you can see in that picture that I have tinctures and dried herbs, and I have capsules. I have some of my jars and things underneath that you can't see, some of my tins that are empty. So I'll kind of show you the process. If you go back, so when I pick something and I dry it, I like the dehydrator or those flat laundry baskets that you saw the red clover hanging on. I have like 10 of those things. And so even if I pick bushels of something, I'm always going to have room to store it. I like those because they fold close into a circle about this big. And when I need them, I pop them open. And I got them for $5. They're flat laundry dryers is what they are.
That is what these are, right?
Favorite. Yeah, that's what that is. Just a flat laundry, like a sweater dryer. And they're $5. I got those at Aldi's grocery store when they had them, but you can get them on Amazon anytime. And they're super cheap. They're compact, and they dry a lot of plants at one time.
Yeah, a lot of material at once.
Yes, so I do love those. So once you're confident that they're very dry, transfer them into a jar. If you have those moisture absorber packets, it's really great to add those to these, just so that if there's any residual moisture, which really try to make sure that there's not. If you have just a ton of something, go ahead and put it in a bag like this and store it away in a bin where there's not a lot of oxygen or sunlight or temperature change, and fill your jar as you go on your shelving. But
Okay.
labeling is going to be your best friend. If you put something in a bag like this, and next year you're like, oh, I know I'm going to know what that is next year. And you open that bag and you're like,
don't.
oh, what was it? You don't know how many times
I've done that.
Something. So
yeah, I've done that too.
the way I like to label anything is this says lyre leaf sage, and I usually like to put Salvia lyrata, which is its botanical name below that. I like to include where I harvested it. Tennessee, my backyard, it could have been Minnesota, especially if I travel, and then I put the month and the year that I harvested it. So this will be like my overflow bag. You can also put them in vacuum packs. You can seal them in vacuum packs, and they'll last years because they have no oxygen. So the way that you know if a plant is still good, I get this question all the time. If it still has its color, its taste, and its smell, those active medicinal ingredients, constituents are still in that plant. So if it's brown and flavorless and doesn't smell like anything, you can go ahead and compost it.
Okay. Yeah. That is very important to know.
I like to go, sometimes this is actually the same plant. I don't even know how I grabbed the same plant because I have hundreds, but this is lyre leaf sage again. And I put it fresh into, it says lyre leaf sage, Salvia lyrata, fresh. If it's dried, I'll put dried plant material. And this says 80 PV. That means 80 proof vodka. Sometimes I use ethanol alcohol, 95%, and then I do all the mathematical equations to get it. You don't have to do that. If you're going to try to keep it simple, use 80 or 100 proof vodka because it's cheap.
Yeah. Or grain alcohol if you can find it.
Yeah. And again, it's 522, so it's actually from that same harvest over there.
So when you're making a tincture with alcohol, sometimes it is okay to use fresh, not dried.
Yes, especially if it's not a wet plant to begin with. So mullein and lyre leaf sage, they're very dry plants to begin with. You can't squeeze moisture out of them. It's when you have a lot of water content in a plant that you have to account for the water in the plant, diluting the concentration of the alcohol, the proof of the alcohol. And that gets a little bit mathematical. But if you're going to harvest something that's very wet, you can wilt it. And it's still considered fresh. You want to wilt some of that moisture out of there. And instead of using an 80 proof vodka, which is 40% alcohol, you would use 100 proof vodka. That is 50% alcohol.
Yeah.
And really what you're aiming for shelf stability is about 30 to 35% alcohol. So that water content would have to be pretty high to dilute it that much.
Okay. Many years ago, when I first started dabbling and making my own herbal tinctures, I read that it was actually sometimes useful to add a small amount of water because some constituents were more water soluble. But I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, I may very well be, if you're dealing with fresh herb to begin with, you probably wouldn't even need to think about that and just use the alcohol.
It depends on, I wish I brought this book in here, but there's a book called something. Is it Medicinal Preparations, Medicine Maker's Handbook? That's what it's called. Okay. And if that is a number one, you have to have it. It's required. Like if you're going to make anything herbal into a preparation, Medicine Maker's Handbook, it's got like this old hippie dude on the front. Is it Tim Green wrote it maybe? But you have to have it. It covers every single preparation that you can make with herbs very thoroughly in the book. And it explains what we're talking about, percentages of alcohol and water and concentrations and shelf stability for tinctures. It goes way into, sometimes you want to add apple cider vinegar to pull out a different kind of constituent. Sometimes it's just kind of like a chemistry thing. And the more you get into it, the more you're going to want to understand those things, especially if you're going to be working with any medicinal mushrooms, because that's a whole nother, that's a dual extraction. That's not just a tincture, that's a dual extraction. And so you're going to want to understand those things. And it's a really inexpensive book that you can get anywhere, but the Medicine Maker's Handbook. And it's
I'm looking it up. Is it the one by James Green?
Yeah, James Green, not
okay.
James Green.
The Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook. Okay.
You must have it. You have to buy that. That's required from here on out to get that book. If you're going to take this,
we'll add that to our list of resources.
You must. So I like to take once this is ready after about 6 weeks. Sometimes I leave them in there for a year.
Yeah.
Not on purpose. As long as it's not composting itself in there, it saves its form pretty well. I like to strain it off and put it into what I call a mother bottle. And again, label it very well. You don't want to put this in there and forget what it was. So label it. This is mullein leaf, Verbascum thapsus, tincture, 80 proof vodka, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, 522. So that's the mother bottle. And from the mother bottle, if you're trying to pass this out to your kids or your friends, you want to put it in a little 2-ounce, 4-ounce bottle. And these have the little screw-on droppers, the dropper bottles. And that's how you would take your tinctures. This is a whole nother class. Tinctures is a whole nother class. That's a 4-hour class that I teach.
But you've given us a good rundown. And I do keep those bottles on hand. And that's what I
you can also infuse things into oils for topical use and make things like salves. That's actually a comfrey salve.
Which is one of the best things. Comfrey and chickweed. This
has comfrey, plantain, chickweed, calendula, and lavender in it. It's my healing salve blend. And then it's got beeswax from our beehives here on the property and a little bit of coconut oil. Good. So you can make things for topical use. You can powder them into a fine powder and encapsulate them. If something's super bitter and your kids aren't going to take it, you can encapsulate it. I like to take all my dried plants and make a tea. So this is my, let's see, that's the mountain mint tea that I make. And it's got a bunch of different stuff in it. But there's a lot of uses for plants. Just learn the way that you like to take it. Some people are big into tea drinking. I don't really have the time for that. I'm a busy mom of 4. And so I like tinctures,
I do too.
They don't have a shelf life. I mean, they last forever. And
our new friend Oops says water will cut burn from alcohol. And I take a heart tincture every morning, which has hawthorn berry, cayenne, and a couple of other things. And I give it to my husband, who had a widowmaker heart attack almost 6 years ago. I put it in water. The cayenne, of course, is really hot. So I just put it in water and we drink it that way.
It's okay to drink it in water, but it can't be more than like 1 ounce. So because it will flush straight through the kidneys, and it will actually, instead of absorbing into your stomach lining and going into your system, it will flush through your kidneys, and it can actually take, it'll flush out the tinctures out, and they won't go into your system. So it's okay to drink it with water.
Good point.
But
I usually use just a little shot glass.
Yeah, that's perfect. You don't want to just add it to a big old water bottle and sip it throughout the day or something and think you're getting your dose, because it really needs to go. That's why a lot of people take them under the tongue. So it goes directly into your bloodstream.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do that, and I had not thought about that. Now, the heart tincture with cayenne might be a little bit much for under the tongue.
Oh yeah, I don't take it under the tongue either, because alcohol does burn under the tongue.
Yeah,
but if you
Oops does. Well, I don't know Oops if you take it under the tongue straight, but Oops takes it straight, and I used to, but I usually, to make it a little bit easier, do put it in a shot glass with just a little bit of water.
So the cayenne, turmeric, and ginger and garlic is a great quad combo, but it's hard to make that into a tincture and take it, especially if you're really sensitive to the cayenne. So that's actually one of them that I encapsulate. So that may be one of the reasons that you would encapsulate something.
And when you say encapsulate, that's simply filling veg caps with liquid or, well,
I use dry powder.
A question. Okay, I was going to say, I tend to like the liquid, a tincture, because your stomach doesn't have to digest it.
Right.
You
Yeah.
just absorb. But
Yeah.
the dry herb has to actually go all the way through your digestive
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
So do you have an opinion on whether that is as effective as taking a tincture or making an herbal infusion?
Yeah. I think all three are, I think it's a preference thing. So instead of, if you're not going to drink a big old cup of cayenne tea, I mean,
Yeah.
some cayenne is a good example. That is literally one of the ones that I only encapsulate two things, and that's one of them. And
Okay.
it's not for personal use. It's because I sell them to the public. And so I have to keep in mind, like for personal use, I might be able to take a cayenne tincture, but even for me, that would probably be a lot. Things like burdock root and yellow dog and artichoke leaf are so bitter that in a tincture, it can actually cause some people to vomit because they're so bitter. So that's another
Yeah.
thing you might want to encapsulate, just so you're swallowing the capsule of it. Drink it with maybe some warm water or some tea, so that
Yeah.
it's almost like it's steeping in your stomach, right? Because instead of a bunch of cold water that's not going to melt that capsule very quickly, maybe some
Yeah.
hot water that will.
Warm water. Yeah. But you mentioned the fact that these are bitter, and it used to be common to have bitter herbs on your dinner plate
Yes, yes,
because they stimulate the digestive fluids.
yes, and
We don't
especially
have
by
that very.
taste. Americans are the only nation that hate bitter. That there was like
Yeah.
studies done, and North Americans are the only ones who don't have bitter things in their diet on a daily basis, and like fermented foods and things like that. So
Yeah.
when your tongue tastes bitter, so artichoke leaf is one of the most bitter things, and I actually use that as a digestive bitter to stimulate good digestive health. What it does, your tongue tastes bitter and it starts producing more saliva, and your
Hmm.
saliva has digestive enzymes in it that prepare the body for a meal to break down carbohydrates and fats and sugars.
Yeah.
And so if you're not getting that, you're not doing yourself any favors with digestion. So
Yeah.
bitters are wonderful right before a meal to stimulate appetite and also to help break down a meal thoroughly so you can be getting the maximum nutrition from your food.
And then if you add fermented vegetables to that, like sauerkraut or fermented condiments, yeah, then
Yeah,
you're getting double. Good. Well, I think we need to be winding down here now.
right.
So I want to ask, what are some key things that you'd like to leave us with? Any a favorite herb, a favorite preparation, or a favorite anything?
Well, there's too many to pick from that. What I do want to leave you with is don't become overwhelmed. Don't say that's too much information. We're just trying to fire hydrant you right now, and it can seem very overwhelming. But this is a fun process and a very doable process, especially with how many
Yeah.
resources are available in every avenue today, whether it be people and classes and books and apps and videos and YouTube. All those things are available to us.
Yeah.
So, like I said, pick 5 herbs. Even if it takes you all year to learn those 5 herbs, you're going to be so good at it that you'll be able to teach your own herb class on those 5 herbs. I always say get good enough at one herb to teach it, because when you teach, you learn so much more.
Yeah.
So even if you're just going to do a dandelion class this spring and get some kids on board and maybe do a homeschool class, it brings it full circle. It brings your learning process full circle when you can teach it back to somebody else, and you've kind of solidified what you've learned and brought the community into your learning process. So I think that would be my advice: is get really good at one thing or 5 things and be able to teach those, and don't
Yeah.
be overwhelmed by it. Yeah.
And it's the only difficult part is narrowing it down to one or two things for me
Yeah.
because, well, it just all fascinates me. And I think that once you start with one thing and then another, pretty
Mhm.
soon you want to delve in and just keep learning more. Um, I just love the Penelope Odie books for those because she makes it very approachable and
Yeah.
doable.
I would say pick something that's on your property and pick something that's going to serve you or your family in something that you're needing, you know, so that it's immediately applicable to you.
And our friend Carmen and Oops both mentioned garlic and black garlic. And that is a very important herb that we didn't even touch on. So there is a lot more we can talk about.
It's endless.
Onion poultices for chest infections. That's a whole another way to use a very common herb.
Yeah, get that book. It covers poultices very well. You would understand the medicinal herb preparation. Medicine Maker's Handbook by James Green.
I think that a whole bunch of us are going to order it. Erin just said she's going to. Yeah. I will. So we'll put a link up for that on in the comments here. If Erin, she's probably already done it. She's very efficient. And if not, it'll be up within minutes. But I want to get that as well. No, I'm really grateful for this. I actually want to have you come up to my neck of the woods and do an herb walk for my local group here. I think that would be fun if you're up for it, but we can talk about that separately. And in the meantime, I need to come see you at your coffee shop. Another
That's
herb.
where I'm headed next. I need my afternoon. But I do have a YouTube channel that has very simple videos. Okay, so I try not to overwhelm anybody. I try to keep it simple, very visual. It's called Wild Harvest Life, and it used to be called The Artist and the Herbalist, and it was hard for people to remember. So Wild Harvest Life, and it's just short, easy videos that I think will be applicable to most people because I try to stick to herbs that are very prolific in most of them.
And Erin has posted that link. I've watched several of your videos in the past and found them very helpful, informative, and engaging. So
my kids film half of them, so if they're real shaky and I get comments on someone's sniffing in the background. Well, that's my 5-year-old. It's filming. So I'm not a pro. I don't edit things. I'm very low tech. I hate being on the computer and my phone. You will find me in the woods, and I don't know how to edit, and I don't really want to learn. So,
well, I'm kind of with you on that.
So, yeah, just take it for what it is. But yeah, I appreciate you having me today, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And hey, what do you think, Olivia? Are you thankful?
Pretty girl. Hey, pretty girl.
She's been popping in to see. We'll have to go weed walking and see what's on their new place because they just moved. So
yeah, even today we were harvesting things. So it's the deepest, deadest winter, and there's things out there. So
yeah, there are always things out there. Well, thank you so very much, Alicia. We're really grateful for all of sharing your vast knowledge, and there's so much more we can do, but we need to say goodbye for now. So that's what we'll do. So we will catch you later. And everyone that has tuned in, thank you so much. We're really grateful that you chose to hop on today. And I will ask that you will like, share, and subscribe. You hear that every time you watch a YouTube video, but it actually is really important. So, so we're going to ask for you to do that. Please do share our videos with your friends and check out our resources. And what do you think, Olivia? Want to say bye?
Bye.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.